And actually, there's a friend here tonight, Patricia Burke, in the back of the room, was also in the film. She was one of the ones that talked about electrical sensitivities. And she has been a champion in Massachusetts where National Grid has come in, and they have done this smart grid pilot program, and it's been a fiasco from the get-go. One, they never gave informed information to the citizenry, so everybody wound up with these meters in Worcester, and in true environmental justice fashion, a lot of these industries go into a largely impoverished community, install their toxic products, and then say, hey, look, worked great here. Now we're going to roll it out across the state. But thanks to Patricia and a number of other constituents in Massachusetts, we've been able to put some of the skids on this project. But Patricia, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thanks. We have another bill in Massachusetts. Thanks so much to all of you for coming. We have a second bill in Massachusetts to investigate the Worcester National Grid Smart Meter Pilot Program because there are a lot of different narratives going around about it, and most of them aren't true. And I looked on the National Grid website for Rhode Island before I came down, and they are bragging about the Worcester Pilot Program to Rhode Island. I don't know how many of you saw the article from Eco Rhode Island by Tim Faulkner, but he wrote in there, oh, is he here? He wrote in the article that we've been communicating for a couple of years now. He wrote that the administrator for the State Division of Public Utilities and Carriers has endorsed the 5G legislation, saying it's needed to build a smart grid electricity transmission technology. And there are other states that have smart meters and smart grids, and they don't have 5G. So they're kind of already linking one to the other. And then he said, this is a high priority for us, not the least of which is because of our work with National Grid. So again, I would love to work with some people in Rhode Island because I think we can collaborate and also promote the bill that we have and the findings about National Grid because I think it's actually fraudulent. So I have some cards and I'll be at the back, and come speak to me if you'd like to pursue that aspect of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. I spent most of my life in Massachusetts. About 10 years ago, I lived near a cell tower in Rhode Island and started having symptoms, been electrosensitive for about 10 years. Massive impact financially and in my health and life, incredible impact. But I have a lot of respect for the way Massachusetts does things. Very educated, activist, etc. That's a very big pond you're swimming in though too, right? That's a big world. One of the unique things about Rhode Island, I've been here about 10 years, is you can affect things on a statewide change with much less influence because it's a small government, it's a small state, but it has impact nationally because it'll be seen. So in terms of investing some resources in Rhode Island, I would really recommend that as an option. So we could talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And there's additional good news. So Massachusetts right now has 8 bills regarding man-made radiation, and those 8 bills are directly sponsored by legislators. 7 of them have been introduced in prior sessions, and so they've got some good legs under them. We've had experts, many of them from the film, were kind enough to take their time and send in testimony for us. And then we've got another dozen bills that citizens have introduced. So we've really got some good templates. If anybody wants to work with their legislators, take a look at what we've got. And on my research repository, I have a page for the Massachusetts EMF bills. So by all means, reuse what we've got, add to it, make it better. But some good news, as you say, with a smaller state, up in New Hampshire. So there was a woman there who was electrically sensitive. She learned about Generation Zapped. She reached out and I said, sure, I'll come up. And her library sponsored it. We did a screening. And then this fall, her state rep was doing his campaigning and knocked on her door. She says, hi, come on in. So she brought him in and she educated him on this. And this is Representative Patricia Burke. And he was pretty much blown out of the water. So Pat OBrien wrote a bill, and he and this woman drove down. We sat in my kitchen in Massachusetts for an afternoon and talked about this issue. They move a lot faster in New Hampshire than they do in Massachusetts. Our bills haven't even been assigned to committees yet, and his has already been assigned to the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee, and they had a hearing last Tuesday, and Rep. OBrien reached out to the chair and said, you know, we'd like some real time to talk about this issue. So they already had on the docket for that morning a presentation by the industry on 5G, and they welcomed us to come in and listen. So it was pretty cool to sit there and hear Verizon and AT&T and other companies that have the hard wiring backbone, because remember, wireless doesn't work on its own. You've got to plug into hard wiring somewhere. So we got to listen to what the industry was saying, and there was one rep in the room, and for each one after they spoke, he said, so what do we know about this epidemiologically? And the canned response from the industry is always, well, this meets the FCC guidelines, which we know were never safety tested and they're not biologically safe. So it was really hard for me because I was literally sitting right behind the people who were testifying. At one point I caught my head going, so I'm like, oh yeah, let's be professional. So I stopped myself. But I was so honored to get up there and testify and to be able to share the real science and the real solutions. This isn't rocket science. This is a runaway industry. And we need to wise up, educate those around us, then start talking to our towns and our schools. But the really cool thing is that the former president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, has become a whistleblower on this. When Mr. Clegg was raising his children, that's when Microsoft was just about software, right? They weren't actually producing the devices back then that have the radio frequency in them. But being in the industry, he knew enough never to have wireless at home. And when his daughters were teenagers and started clamoring for all this technology their friends were being given, he wouldn't give them something that he understood was probably pretty harmful. So when Mr. Clegg retired, it kind of got the better of him, and he sought out a dozen of the world's leading experts in microwave radiation, and he came back and he said, FCC guidelines are not safe, Canada's Safety Code 6 is not safe, and he turned around to his peers and he resigned from every technology board that he served on, and he said, as soon as you can prove to me that this is safe, give me a call. And he said, my phone hasn't rung. So Frank Clegg formed a nonprofit called Canadians for Safe Technology, and he's been up in Parliament trying to do what we're trying to do down here, and that's to get protective measures in place for the public. So he came down, he flew in on his own time and dime, and he testified in New Hampshire last week. And Dr. Paul Heroux is a professor in the medical school at McGill, which I understand is like Canada's Harvard. He teaches electromagnetism in his courses. He also does lab explorations, and he knows scientifically, because he's done a lot of the science himself, just how toxic this is. So he was able to come down and teach the representatives in New Hampshire just exactly what this technology is. So it was very powerful, and it has to get through the House, and then it'll go to the Senate, and then it goes to the governor. But we got to educate 21 state reps on Tuesday of last week, and the chairman wrote back this week and said, you know, I've already changed my cell phone usage patterns, so maybe New Hampshire will be the one that tips us over. But I've also worked with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. I'm a tech writer by trade. I've learned my way around this issue, so I reached out and said, as a mom, I get things from my schools on lead in drinking water or the H1N1 virus. How about if I take one of those fact sheets from the DPH and make it be an EMF fact sheet? I said, would that be helpful? And they're like, oh yeah, we've just finally been able to staff up. They had to do cuts when 9/11 happened. So I did. I wrote a fact sheet for them. We went around, we cleaned it up a little bit, and then they said, we'll take it from here. They came back and said, we think we want to break it down into a series of 4 fact sheets based on the point of emissions. So they told me they did one on cell towers, one on cell phones, one on Wi-Fi, and one on the high voltage power lines. And they were supposedly sent down to graphic design, but they have yet to be released. And so when Dr. Moskowitz at UC Berkeley found out, and I talked to him and told him we had these fact sheets, he requested through the Freedom of Information Act a copy of those fact sheets, and his request was denied, saying that these are still in draft format, so we don't have to give them to you. That's when he picked up the phone and called the Boston Globe and said, hey, you guys know that Massachusetts, for some reason, has been sitting on these fact sheets for 2 years. And so the editors at the Globe put Hiawatha Bray on it, who's the technology reporter, and his feet were very much more on the ground that second conversation we had, which was great. So in that article from the Boston Globe, they've said that those fact sheets will be out in the next 6 months. We've worked with the Department of Education. As soon as those fact sheets are out, the Department of Education is poised to start getting out through their channels information to our families and our schools. So we're planting many, many, many seeds, but who knows? Who knows what's going on in the back room? So it's critically important that we educate our citizens, because not much happens in a democracy if the public is not educated and then speaking up for change. So one voice is not going to cut it. That was my hard lesson learned in Ashland. I thought I would raise my hand and say, I think we have a problem. They'd say, oh my gosh, let's fix it. But they're being held accountable by the state for implementing the 21st century classroom. So don't go it alone. Educate your loved ones, educate your colleagues, educate your friends, educate your kids' parents, their friends' parents, and then as a team, go in and say, hey, we have some really important information to share with you, and we would like to ensure that our children are protected. We would want to ensure that our towns are protected so that we don't have a cell tower outside our bedroom tomorrow morning. So there's not a lot of time, and I know it's going to take some time to get your head around this, and I tell people freak out for 10 minutes while it all soaks in and you start seeing where all this stuff is. And maybe you brought Roku or Chromecast in your bedroom. Maybe you've got a soundboard. Maybe you've got a smart printer. Maybe, maybe you're wearing something to bed every night to track your heart that's pulsing microwave radiation at you. So we all have our choices to make, but don't wait too long, because the industry is moving screaming fast. And even since this film was released, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is our government's highest research branch, finally released the final report of a decades-long study that they spent $30 million on. It's the most expensive study their organization has ever done. They went in expecting to prove that cell phones were safe, because that was the technology of the day when they got started, and instead they found statistically significant heart tumors, additional brain tumors, DNA damage, which is the roadmap to grow a proper human, and other things with the adrenals and the thyroids, and then the Ramazzini Institute in